Hello everyone, welcome back to the next installment of Teach, Sleep, Repeat. My name is Dylan.
And my name is Hayden.
And you could tell by our wide smiles that we've just had an amazing recording for this episode with another guest. You know who it is, you've seen the title. We're going to get into it really, really quickly. But Hayden, I'm going to do some plugging, okay?
You don't want me to do it?
No, because you don't never remember correctly. You remember that's the whole running joke.
Right.
So when you have to explain the running joke, it doesn't really work as well, does it? But anyway, I'm going to just now plug some of our social media and test my memory because there's a different one for every single platform that we're on.
So you on the spot.
You can find us on Instagram. I know you can find us on Instagram at Teach Sleep Repeat Podcast. You can Gmail us or email us on our Gmail at teachsleeprepeatpod@gmail.com. And we are now on Twitter. Come and find us. It's me who tweets. Hayden's got his own one. He's too busy running that personal account. You can find us at Teach SR Podcast on Twitter. Now, am I positive that's the actual name? No, but if it's made the cut, then it is. So make sure you find us there. And that's the problem with having 7 different names for the different things. Anyway, Hayden, how excited are you for this chat we're about to have?
Well, as you've already said, we've recorded it, but it was an amazing chat. Let's not pretend we haven't just recorded it. It's an incredible chat.
Mask has slipped.
The viewers and listeners have got an exciting conversation upcoming, if they are as nerdy about maths as you and I are.
There is one thing though, Hayden, and it's a problem for some people who are listening. Okay, in order for the podcast to continue playing, you need to give us a 5-star review. So as long as you've done that, do that now really quickly if you're listening. Give us a 5-star review, gets us more guests in the future, more amazing chats. Yeah. But the podcast does actually stop if you don't do that.
And send us £5 in the post, right? So
yeah, 500.
£500.
Anyway,
yeah.
Shall we have the chat that we've definitely not had yet and just pre-recording this?
Let's move on to the chat we're about to have. We are really lucky today to be joined with another guest, Mr. Gareth Metcalfe himself, who I personally have been a big fan of for a very long time. I know that Dylan has been laughing at me for fanboying behind the scenes on the lead up to this episode. So Gareth, just want to say a huge thank you for joining us. Let's dive straight in and let the viewers and listeners know a little bit more about you and why you're here today. So Gareth, could you just introduce yourself and let us know perhaps what is your involvement in the primary teaching world?
Yeah, thanks, Hayden. It's really great to be here. Kind of my background professionally, so I did my NQT year down south, and then I've been at worked at one school in Stockport, which I absolutely loved, for 12 years. Had an amazing time there. In my time there, I did a little bit of work with Stockport Local Authority, supporting with maths specifically. I wrote a lot of resources around maths. I was very lucky to work with an amazing man, a literacy consultant that many listeners will know of, called Alan Peat. And published my first ever resources with Alan, which was fantastic. But I guess my passion then just became specifically in maths teaching. And I loved the school I was at, but I wanted to broaden my teaching experience. So in 2017, I took the really difficult decision at the time to leave, but to work directing my own company, IC Maths. But what I wanted to do was broaden my teaching experience as well. So in that move, I made sure that there were a number of schools, some were in England, some were in North Wales, where I'd have an ongoing teaching commitment. So I ended up teaching classes from nursery to year 6 in a range of different types of schools, demographics, which was just fantastic. I really enjoyed that. And then spending some time writing resources ever since. And doing some training, and really that kind of meandering journey is still where I'm at now, and really enjoying it.
Well, I remember your first resources back in maybe, I guess, about 2017, because I purchased one of your first IC reasoning PDFs, and I was in awe because I was quite a fresh teacher at this point, and I actually came to see you as well at one of your training events around that time. And I remember just sitting there as a fairly new teacher, thinking, this guy is doing it exactly how I imagined maths is supposed to be taught. And just using your resources, going around the school saying, come on, we've got to use these because this is how we should be teaching children how to solve problems. So thank you for doing that. It must have been quite a scary leap for you at the time, but clearly a really good one. So regarding your resources, where are they kind of at now? Because obviously that was a long time ago that I looked into those. Have you kind of developed a whole pack of resources now that's a much larger than?
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting story, because the first ever resources I actually wrote, and the ones that I referenced that were published by Alan Peat, were quite off the wall actually, and were a real kind of passion projects of mine. The first one was called the Maths Apprenticeship, and it was around extended real life challenges at that point for year 6 children. And so I had some amazing memories, which we may refer to later, of rolling out those tasks. And I wrote some other resources as well, which were really like looking at really rich, engaging maths tasks that at that time were more aimed at children, high retaining children. And I remember writing a blog post quite a while ago, and that was when I was new to writing blog posts, which probably had, and in it I thought I'm gonna share some examples of something more of the kind of tasks that I do on a day-to-day basis. And I didn't really expect them to particularly pique people's interest. But I actually had an enormous reaction to that original blog post. And it made me think, well, actually, what I really want to focus my effort on is how do I help teachers, and I say time-pressured teachers, and of course that's all teachers, to have some resources, great open-ended resources, interesting thought-provoking challenges at their fingertips right across the breadth of the primary maths curriculum, something that you could more use on a day-to-day basis. And in doing that, I had like a huge bank that I'd used with the classes that I'd taught, which were primarily in Upper Key Stage 2. And really, I guess ever since then, I've looked, over the course of time, particularly when we work in different classes, you realise you pick up new ideas. I follow other people and I think, oh, that's a technique that I could build in. And so the resources keep growing. And my aim over the course of time will be to keep doing that same thing, really big banks of resources. But I guess the idea is, how is it we give children tasks that don't just develop the content knowledge, but also provide them opportunities to be creative or to have to persevere to find multiple possible answers, to be able to see different perspectives. So it's, whilst I want the children to have the opportunity to develop that content knowledge as well through the tasks, I also hope it just gives them a different experience of engaging in maths and kind of builds their, if you like, the characteristics of learning as well.
I'm going to come in quickly because on something you said there, I noticed it a lot in your resource before. I've seen it before where you had certain levels. And I loved those kind of ideas of going deeper and deeper. And you think, find one answer, find as many answers as you can, find all the answers. And that idea of, I was able to give that to my class, and some children were just working at the level of finding an answer. And then I had some who very quickly moved on to finding as many answers as possible, and others who are coming up with ideas of how to make sure they've got all the possible ways. And it was amazing to see as a maths teacher, a whole group of different abilities being able to access kind of the same task. And that idea of actually it's how far you go. And that kind of opened up my thinking to approaching maths in that kind of way of, that kind of mastery idea of everyone's achieving the same goal, the same objective, but they're all getting there in different ways and pushing themselves to different levels. And that kind of clicked something for me. And I thought, I'd love to be able to approach all of my maths teaching in that way, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah, I think like one thing that's always really driven me is the idea that I think maths is unique in the range of emotions that it invokes. And that's something that I always think is precious about maths. And when there are certain kinds of tasks where children have to be able to self-regulate, and it gives them the opportunity to explore to a greater extent, then I feel that they experience a taste of the actual richness of what it is to be a mathematician, if you like, rather than just to develop the content knowledge. And I think it's been that's been the thread which has gone right throughout all my kind of resource creation. And that's certainly the intention anyway.
No, it absolutely did. It really did. What we're going to do now, though, very quickly, we did this last time we had a guest, and it's something we're trying out because we finished it last time, and the poor person said, I felt under pressure doing that, so we're not trying to do that, to make that clear. But we're going to play a quick kind of game, okay? So I'm going to say one word. I'll do an example on Hayden now, okay? So if for example, I said to Hayden, the gym, I'd want him to come back to me and say the first word that comes to his mind. So Hayden, the gym.
Terrifying, you know.
Terrifying. Yeah. So it's something he might want to avoid. So I'll say a word and just your first thought coming back to it. Are you ready? You up for this?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, we've tried to pick some relevant ones as well. So first one, number one, rote learning.
Necessary.
The times table check, year 4.
Oh, I'm necessary.
Yeah, we're
that's
going
cool.
all the way through. Okay, marking.
Marking. More or less specific.
Oh.
I can explain that. Just
Oh.
but if you want me to.
You can go on, explain it.
It's
Go
just
on.
the idea
Let's
that I
break
think
it.
that sometimes marking, we can be less specific. Dylan Willing talks about this. 4 are correct, 2 are incorrect. In other instances, we need to be more specific.
Oh.
But I like the idea of giving children more work to do, where it's relevant.
Absolutely. Okay, let's keep going. Staff training.
Ongoing.
English.
English. I don't know. My mind has gone totally blank now. Maybe
That's fine.
About me.
That's fine. That's
What
an
is that
answer,
subject?
That's an answer.
We don't talk about English in this podcast episode, Dylan.
This is a maths
How
podcast.
dare you?
We're not trying to be mean, I promise. It always comes across like that. Okay, a couple more. Ready?
Yeah.
The Key Stage 2 SATs.
Unlimited.
Oh. Teacher wellbeing.
Crucial.
Maths investigations.
Rich.
Mm.
Nice.
And the last one, we always finish with this one because I just find it interesting to see what people say straight away. Ofsted.
Necessary evil.
Brilliant answer.
Nice.
That's my favorite one. Yeah, very good. Okay, so the idea of that is we just get to break the ice a little bit, and sometimes, like we did with marking, we can just dive in a bit deeper there. And I think the one thing that I found interesting was when you said rich for maths investigations, because I found in the past with maths investigations, this can kind of link to, I suppose, your resource creation, is it used to be a little bit like when I started my career, that when it came to investigations or even problem solving in maths, it would be a Friday job, and that would come from SLT down. And it would be like, well, it's problem solving, it's word problem Friday. Yeah. And I feel like as a whole profession, thankfully, I think we're moving away from that a lot now, because I think a lot of people, when the new curriculum came in, maybe thought it was just trendy to kind of shoehorn it in there and just say, oh, we're doing a problem solving day. And I think problem solving is a lot more nuanced than that now. So just wondering really, what's your kind of opinion on the place of problem solving in the curriculum and how we can kind of embed that a bit of a more wholesome approach, instead of it just kind of being shoehorned on and being a word problem, which doesn't really encompass problem solving.
Well, it's a great question, and hopefully I can touch on just some of my random responses there. I like to think of problem solving as being the end that we're aiming at, and so when we talk about things like the times table check, and maybe we I think I use the word necessary and fluency, I would see that as almost a means to the end, and the end being we want children to be able to engage and break down all kinds of different problem solving tasks, and we know that fluent recall of times table facts is not the enemy of that. It's not the opposite of that. It's just it lessens burden on working memory. But the thing that I think is really important is we don't see problem solving as the thing that as the icing on the cake, but more that this is fundamental. Like when we look at why we even engage children in mathematics, you think it's partly, or to a large extent, it's actually about them being able to break down different types of problems and think independently and to build these skills. And so I think of problem solving in terms of, let's say there's a sequence of lessons, and we're thinking we want the children to be engaged in this kind of task, and to have the skills in a toolbox to break this down and to explore this kind of task. And I would think, well, how do we work backwards from that rather than problem solving Friday? I don't think the issue is that we're doing the problems. It's just a disconnect. like we referred to. And I think we know that we need a lot of domain-specific knowledge to have success in problem solving. And I think I underappreciated earlier in my career how important that domain-specific knowledge was. And I probably thought, if I build children's ability to problem solve in one aspect of the curriculum, then they'll be able to do it in another as well. And it's probably more reliant on that domain-specific knowledge. But I think the thing that's really important is thinking, well, how do we target? Well, we want the children to be able to engage in these kinds of problem-solving tasks. And therefore, the journey for them to get there will need to look like this. And for that to be coherent. And I guess one of the issues that I see where there's an over-reliance on schemes. I think if we just blindly follow a scheme, what we, in some instances, we might end up with is the highest attaining children doing the problem solving at the end of the lesson. And I think it's really important that we model what expert problem solving looks like, and we provide sequences of challenges that build children's capacity to problem solve. And rather than it being something, because to some extent, perhaps there's an element to which we can consider, well, the children can meet age-related expectation without having to go that deep within the problem solving. And I think that's perhaps a slight kind of separate issue.
That is completely true, because I know for a fact Hayden and I, and all teachers, we can fall into that trap. And you hear things sometimes, and we've probably been guilty of saying it in the past, where we think, okay, well, in terms of data for these children, they can get X amount of marks on the arithmetic paper, and we can really focus on that fluency and really get them to be practicing that over and over again, and not necessarily exposing those children to problem solving that's appropriate for their ability and their understanding of those basics. So a big thing we did in school was we did a lot of staff training and trying to implement the idea of problem solving for everyone, like you just said. And we can't save it as a challenge. It's not a challenge. It is the maths. It's as fundamental as that. And the idea of, okay, how can we ensure that those children who maybe struggle to meet age-related standards in arithmetic and don't meet that level of fluency for their age expectation, how can we still ensure that those children are receiving enriching problem-solving activities which are relevant for them? And the kind of conclusion we came to was that it's okay to, if you're, for example, teaching a fractions unit, if your child's still maybe working at a year below level or not quite there, it's okay to dip back into the curriculum a bit lower to provide them with those problem solving ability, those chances to do problem solving in a way where they're confident with the maths and the structures of what they've got to do, but then their cognitive load is really focused on actually breaking down the problem rather than struggling to do the maths in the first place, in which case we see a lot of children hit a brick wall and they can't access it.
Absolutely. And that is the advice that I would give, I guess, really. And looking for the tasks, like when we're looking for a problem-solving task, we're looking for something where there's not a clearly defined strategy to find the answer. And we might have to think, well, where do we lessen the challenge from to make that accessible? And like the most obvious example would be the number range that the task itself asks us to work within. But considering how is it that we still engage children in those kinds of tasks? Because I do think as well, with even with the SATs papers, a lot of the problems, what we would consider the worded questions, the problem-solving tasks, are relatively routine. And there are some which are a little bit more off the wall. But there's a degree to which you can predict some of the structures that will exist. But I do think it's really important that children have that balance of experience, so that there aren't too many, like their experience of math doesn't become too closed and too limited, even including the kind of emotional responses they're like to have to walk through when their attainment's lower. I think it's easy to see how that can happen for a child whose attainment is higher. But I think, like you say, it's incumbent on us to think, well, how is it that we can ensure that all children are given those experiences?
Absolutely. And even on a Tuesday, it doesn't have to be a Friday.
Gareth, I know you've made videos, and you still do make videos, which you upload to YouTube and I imagine other places as well. And I've been really fascinated with a few of them, because I've actually seen that you have taken SATs questions and you've kind of systematically kind of broken them down. You know, when you're doing that, what's your advice to other teachers? What's your procedure for breaking down the typical kind of SATs problem that's maybe a couple of steps, and actually teaching children ways to solve these problems without just going through, because I fall into this trap all the time. I'll go through a particular SATs paper or question, but I don't really feel like the children are getting loads from that, simply just solving that one problem. But I feel like you do it in a different way that opens up a whole new avenue of being able to actually teach children how to solve problems.
Yeah, thank you. Now, this is something that I'm really passionate about, and I have to say, this is one of those things where I feel really privileged, because all of my thinking I can invest into maths teaching. Whereas, I know how challenging it is when you're a full-time class teacher and you maybe have other responsibilities, to really spend the time you'd need to dig into one question and think, how can I break this down? The thing that I kind of keep referring to is a research paper, which you'd be able to find if you Googled it, which is removing opportunities to calculate improves students' performance on subsequent word problems. And the basic finding was, if we initially take away the possibility of children telling you the answer, then they'll have to think about the structure of the question first. So that's
so powerful.
Absolutely. I would normally just look at a question and think, what can I remove at first? So children can process this information, but they can't tell you the answer. And then I would think, what are the pieces of information I can load in? Now, it might be as simple as covering one of the numbers, or it might just be, I'm going to hide a piece of information and then I'll slowly reveal that. Or I might ask the children, so what information do we need to be given to answer this question? What information will be under this box? And I had the luxury of being able to think for quite a while about one question and thinking, well, how is it that this could be revealed? So I think like an example would be from the previous year's SATs paper, a coordinate question, which we might consider one of the most difficult ones on the paper. And we can look at the information that's given, and then we can start thinking, well, what do we already know? And maybe we can work some kind of an estimate from the information that's given. What other information will we need? And then look at how that information can kind of be slowly built back in.
No, it's fascinating because it's something that, as maths leads in school, we are constantly thinking of ways of trying to help our staff. Like you're saying there, you say you're privileged to have that time to kind of dive deeply into maths. And one of our biggest goals as leaders in school is to try and allow staff to make that professional development, to have these amazing resources, to have these brilliant ideas without it being incumbent on them to spend hours and hours doing so. So it's one of our biggest challenges. And that's where your kind of resources really do have such a powerful impact on staff, because it's so clearly broken down. Anyone can follow it, and the way you explain things is really powerful. And I think it gives teachers that ability to actually feel like they're properly teaching problem solving, not just teaching maths, not just teaching procedures, which I think we fall into a lot, but to feel as a teacher that you're teaching problem solving is kind of our goal. Because I'm completely on the same page as you, Gareth, when you say, what's the point of teaching maths? Well, we want functioning adults in our society who can approach problems and solve them by using these mechanisms that we call maths. I mean, it's just, it's brilliant just to hear you talking about it. It's awesome. Something I did want to ask you about, though, in terms of kind of linked to our role as maths leads, and I know Hayden and I are constantly thinking of ways of how to help our colleagues, basically. You work with a lot of schools, like you said, and you provide training to a lot of people. Just wondering really how you find that, and in terms of, do you find a lot of pushback sometimes to changing the ways we teach maths? I know maybe with people who are kind of set in their ways before this idea of mastery came in, setting and having task A, task B, task C, and starting on certain points. It's kind of changed a lot, it feels like. And Hayden and I kind of trained to be maths teachers as that change was happening, so we don't know any different. Do you find there's a pushback of many teachers, or do you find they're just kind of there to take in as much as possible and want to change and want to improve? How do you find that as a trainer?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that I have been, over the course of all the time, of all the work that I've done with teachers, I've just been blown away by teachers and their capacity to want to support and help children. And I, I've just got an overwhelmingly positive experience. The thing that I would say, though, and I experienced this myself teaching massively, is just that the time, when you talk about well-being, the time pressures that we're under, our time is so precious. And that there is, and also almost the mental energy that you have, because the job is so demanding. And I think the issue is when you have to, it is cognitively heavy to have to deviate from the resources that you have, what you kind of currently do. And I always think there's only so many different avenues you can explore at any one time. And so I do think it is, let's say from the perspective of a maths leader, it is thinking about when is it right, and which, as I say, buttons is it right to press, which things is it right to explore, and some thought about the process of that. So I might start the ball rolling for schools in terms of suggesting, let's say, looking at the way to deconstruct a question. And then the thing that I always encourage schools is to think about is what that process might look like. So initially it might be an individual or a couple of teachers exploring, well, what would this look like in my class, and almost doing like a little trial, and then thinking we might build a little bank, and being considerate as to what's the right time to address this with the whole staff, given the kind of bigger picture. Because I think it is, I think that teachers express that this is something that they have a desire for, and it's something they see the benefit in. And teachers want to be able to focus the teaching around the problem solving, but the limitations are really understandable as well, I think, to some extent.
You're really hitting home with me personally, because I know exactly what you mean. As someone who is really, really passionate about teaching maths, I'm having mixed emotions almost for this conversation, because I'm starting to reflect on, my job right now, and I'm like, do you know what? There are certain things that we've talked about that I feel like I've not done that in a while. I used to be like the most passionate person about doing this, and I've not done that in a while. Why is that? And you just think, well, yeah, is it the pressures of the teaching? Is it because after you get passionate, but you're passionate about something for a while, and then suddenly, oh yeah, but you've got this massive English scheme to come in now. Well, actually, we've got to rework this curriculum in history, so you've got to work on that now for a bit. And suddenly, after 6 more things, you find yourself, as a year 6 teacher in particular, I find myself falling into that trap of, yeah, but these kids have got to pass that test. And like Dylan said earlier, and this really hit home, because I hate it. I hate that I do this, but it definitely happens. It's that whole, hang on, how am I going to maximize these children's marks, because I've got 1 month left until the SATs now? Is it these rich maths lessons of problem solving that might not get them quick marks in this test, or is it, let's just do some more arithmetic because actually get some there? And I hate to say it, but I know people will be nodding that are listening. It's quite often the one that gets you better SATs results, and I hate that. I really don't like the fact that even I'm falling into that trap as someone who's really, really passionate about this subject, which I'm finding quite hard.
And let me say that I'd be exactly in that same boat. So I've taken, I think it's 9 cohorts, but it might be 10 through SATs. And like the thing that I would say is and we all, we're all under that pressure. And there are, to some extent, there are certain benefits that children derive from having that real focused effort. And it's certainly true that if you want to improve, and I also been in that situation many times, where you want to improve children's attainment and you've got a month, then the correct thing to do is to focus on developing the kind of content knowledge. And that is, you could say that's appropriate at that time. And, children have this specific focus when they're leading up to the SATs. And I think them having that experience of dealing with something that's, they may see as being pressurized in the course of their life, might not be such a bad thing that they have that experience, they come through that. I think the issue is if that's their experience for 6 or 7 years. And I think there's a time where we want to think, right, we want to really build children's capacity as, for example, as problem solvers, and we want to build the learning behaviors. And then there'll be a point at which we just need to nail the content knowledge. The other thing, just to kind of touch on that as well, is I think it comes to the importance of thinking of working through things as a whole school, as a staff, so that an individual child has a coherent experience, and thinking, if it's, for example, looking at deconstructing word questions, if we introduce a variation of like the same approach, when the children are in year 1 and then year 2 and then it develops in year 3, but we have the same themes. So one of the things I talk about is covering the information with a blue box and the question with a red box, often if I'm doing that when I'm looking at a question. And so children kind of get to see that if they might see a question and there's information that's covered in a blue box. Now, if they've done that in year 3 and in year 4 and in year 5, when you're in year 6, that's almost an embedded behavior, and it's not as difficult for you to implement. Now, it might be that if they haven't done that in year 3 and year 4 and year 5, it's probably not in your interest to do that. But being specific about, well, these are the things that when I say as a staff that we work on, this is how there'll be obviously some individual differences between teachers, but thinking if we do this together, the individual child will have a coherent experience. And that would be my encouragement for schools. And it's both thinking, this is what we'll focus on. And also, of course, it's thinking, well, this is what we'll not focus on.
I think I can think of the ultimate example of
Hayden, I think we're thinking of the same thing.
I don't know.
I think we're thinking of the exact same thing.
Are you thinking of bar modelling?
Yes, exactly the same.
Cool.
Exactly the same.
For me, and I know Dylan's there because I can see you itching to go as well. I'll beat you to it.
Yeah, we're all smiling here going, I know what I'm thinking. I know what I'm thinking. Trying to teach children bar model who've never done it before.
Yeah, I've got a kind of funny story actually for you, Gareth, about that. But bar modelling, I think, is the ultimate example of when it's embedded over years, it can be a really, really effective tool in terms of visualization of problems. But when it's one of those things that is just, you're in year 6 and the children have never seen it before, and you try to tackle a year 6 level problem, and you say, "Come on, guys, let's bar model it. So let's visualize this problem." From my experience of doing this in many, many cohorts, they almost never understand it. They don't like using it, and it's just nonsense to them because it's like you said, if you're introducing the red and the blue boxes really late in the game, it might not be in your best interest. And just a very quick funny story for you. When I was going through the interview process to get my first teaching job, it was like the buzz thing around then. It was about 7-8 years ago. And I went to a school and I got an interview, and I thought, I'm gonna really wow this school. I'm gonna impress them with my maths knowledge. And I went into this year 5 class and I had a 20-minute slot to teach this maths lesson. So I decided to do some problem solving with bar modeling. And it was the most disastrous lesson I've ever taught in my career. And obviously I didn't get the job, but it was hilarious, because they had not a clue what I was talking about, and they could not process, what I was trying to teach them in a 20-minute lesson. So I learned the hard way that sometimes...
You basically just added another cognitive load, didn't you? You just went, well, I don't know how to answer this question, and I don't know what you're drawing on.
Because as an adult, for me, I didn't have the cognitive load of solving the problem because it was easy for me. But the problem was already hard for them, and then I've just chucked in this other really hard concept. So, yeah, that's my story.
Let me just give you, I can't help but give you a little anecdote on that. So when we were trying to appoint a year 4 teacher, and we had lots of teachers coming in to teach a 20-minute lesson, and they were the theme was it had to be based on their topic, which is World War II. And so it was with 2 classes. All the interviewees were teaching these 2 classes, and I would say that 80% of them had an air raid siren going and got the children going under the tables, and then they got them to do something. Now, the children were absolutely rocking for about the first 2 lessons. And then after they had to go under the tables 3 or 4 times, this air raid siren went off. No one was shocked. And they were all like, we have to do this again.
That's
the look on the, and obviously it's not the teachers who were first were the fortunate ones, but it was really hard watching prepared this lesson, thought this is going to really hit
this is going to wow them. And they're like, oh, boring.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've already been bombed 4 times this morning. I just wanted to touch on something, Gareth, because it was something you've mentioned before as well, and it's really interesting to us. And I don't want to jump the gun and presume exactly what this is about, but you talk about the emotional ride of children when they go through maths and how it's a really unique lesson of, you can feel eureka moments, you can feel frustration, this kind of in such a short amount of time. And children struggle to control their emotions at the best of times. That's another thing they're learning to do throughout their journey through school. And you mentioned this idea of concept cartoons, or I'd just love for you to go into some more detail about this thing you're working on at the moment.
Yeah. I'm really excited about this. And it's, when I say I'm working on it, it's really a thought that's been forming in my mind for a while, and it's just like the best way to manifest this. But the thing that I like, if I was to say the two words that we often use to describe the emotions children experience in maths, I think that they would generally be anxiety and fun. And the thing that I kind of come to say is that actually, I very, very rarely think maths I would best describe as being fun. I don't think that as a word that, like, I think maths can invoke fantastically positive emotions, and it can be really rich, and we can have this kind of drive towards finding a solution, and we can feel like we might feel great excitement. But the kind of children's understanding of fun is probably something that's a little bit lighter. And also, I think we can think of what we might call I wouldn't call them the negative emotions, but the uncomfortable emotions, and actually children being able to discern between them, and rather than we just label everything as being anxiety, and actually see the value of them. So for example, like every mathematician will need to be able to deal with frustration, and actually frustration might be really helpful because it might drive us towards action, and it might lead us to question our thoughts. And looking at, well, how do we deal with that frustration? Like, does frustration turn into apathy? And actually noting that sometimes emotions will kind of upregulate us, but sometimes they'll have the opposite effect. And really wanting to help children to be able to recognize some of those different, the different emotions that maths can bring up, and specifically to be able to do so before they experience them. Because the number of times that a child may be in a particular emotional state that's unhelpful for them when they're engaging in maths, I find that trying to address that in that moment isn't that helpful. Whereas if I have prepared them for some of the emotions that they may experience when engaging in maths, they might be better able to deal with them. And so just like one other example might be, if a child's attainment is high, they may find it more difficult when they then encounter challenge, and they may become more defensive then. And it's trying to, I guess, show that like all these emotions are totally human and normal. And it's very understandable that we have them. Like, we're social beings. The fact that we might feel embarrassment. So embarrassment's very different to frustration. And like, it's not our fault if we feel embarrassed. You know, we're wired to, like, however much I say, don't compare yourself to the person next to you, I think children need to know, well, actually, like biologically, that is something that we do. And you need to feel bad about that. But just, you know, we need to be able to look at that thought and recognize that it's just a thought. And trying to find a way, which is the thing I'm doing at the moment, which is this kind of thought of concept cartoons, but trying to find a way to help children to navigate their emotions as it relates to maths. I think it's really important for them more broadly, but I also think it's it's a bottom end thing to their success as a mathematician. And so so it's something that I'm looking into, and what I'll look to do is maybe create a few examples. I'll put them out on social media if and when I get there, and then I'd love getting the feedback from people and seeing. I'm always looking for suggested improvements as well, and like, rather than people just telling me what they like. So
we're falling into that trap today. We'll just be like, "You're amazing, it's so good." But yeah, you're right.
One of the things I absolutely loved, and I still work with the school that I was at for 12 years, is how challenged I am there. And like the head teacher, an absolutely amazing guy, amazing brain, really determined, really child-centered. And I know there that I'm challenged, and it's worth its weight in gold.
I really like the idea you got me thinking when you said about frustration in maths, because two things. Firstly, you're absolutely right, because when I see a child get frustrated, my natural instinct is to console them. And I'm thinking, oh no, I'm going to lose them now. I'm going to lose them. Let's just make them feel better, But actually, I love this idea of showing children, okay, right, frustration, you're on a pathway and it's like a fork in the road, isn't it, almost? You mentioned apathy. It's like, okay, what other ways could we go with this? Maybe it becomes determination. And why does it have to be this negative route where you get, where you just always the same thing, where you just get maybe upset, and then teachers will make judgments. Oh no, that child always gets upset if it's too hard, so we won't give them too hard stuff because they just get upset, and then they can't do the task. So we always just give them a little bit easier stuff. So I really, really like that idea of exploring the emotional root of things, of just showing children, hey, these are normal, by the way. I feel like this. I feel like this when this happens, and when I deal with it in this way, this outcome is often the thing, and when I don't, this is the outcome, and just showing them before it happens. I think that's a really good idea. I'll be very interested to see what you kind of create with that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that one of the biggest, I've made so many mistakes where I've learned things or read about something and think, my goodness, I've done that for this many years. And one of them, which I often refer to in this field, is trying to tell children that maths will be fun today. Now, we know that when we enter into a learning episode, our brain releases epinephrine, so adrenaline for the brain, which is essentially a stress chemical. So learning biologically is uncomfortable. And at that time, I'm telling children how fun maths is going to be. And their physical experience isn't that. It is anything other than that. And actually, it's kind of understanding that, the perseverance and the effort and the frustration is often the precursor to the, if you like, let's say the positive emotions, the pleasant emotions. And so I like to challenge this idea of there being negative and positive emotions. And also just the idea, as I say, like I want, rather than me trying to tell the children maths is fun, I'd like them to experience the kind of if you like, all the breadth of fantastic emotions we experience when we're engaging in maths. But I always think that's more about the task design than it is about me trying to convince them that something's fun. Because actually, also, there's an element to which summer maths is repetitive. And like, I don't think I could convince a child that learning the number bonds to 10 and the times table facts is fun, because I don't think it is. But it is an important precursor to something else which will be rich for them.
I think a really powerful thing that we've unpicked through our conversation here is that there are just so many different aspects and ways that we have to approach maths for it to be a really wholesome experience. And like you said, you need to have, and I love the idea of looking at it through the lens of emotion, like you've just been saying, of this part of maths might well be boring. Like you said, learning your times tables. This part's going to be really frustrating. This part's going to be this emotion, that emotion, and equipping the children to understand that, I think, will put them in such a better place to really attack these things and do them. Because we use times table rockstar in our school, and the idea is, and you're absolutely right here, we'll say, oh, it's fun, you get to make an avatar, and you can go on and earn coins, and it's really fun. For a lot of children, nearly all children, it's not fun. You get the odd child who goes on their own, and does a million minutes a week of times table rockstar. But I think that honest, open discourse with the child does start with the kind of thing you're trying to create here, which is actually teaching them what the emotions are in the first place, because there's going to be a disconnect otherwise. And I think I'm really looking forward to seeing what you come up with, because we can certainly implement them and see how they're going on.
It's one of those things where I feel like I just need to kind of sit in an empty room for a couple of weeks and then come up with some examples. And usually when I've got one or two and I throw them out there and I get some opinions on that, then that's when the ball's rolling. But it's definitely a thing. I think that there's ground to take with helping children to understand and be able to regulate their emotions, certainly when they're doing maths.
So Gareth, a long time ago, as I said, you really inspired me as a fresh teacher to really just think outside of the box with maths teaching. And it was at a time, it was 2014, 2015. So it was at that really pivotal moment where we had the new national curriculum come in, and suddenly everyone was moving away from their textbooks where it was just kind of like columns of A, B, and C, and you do challenge by choice, or you say, right, you're the most able, so you do the hard column and you do the easy column. And we were moving away from that, and you massively inspired me with your resources and with the training you put on to do things like, hey, I still remember the day when you gave an example on the screen of showing hiding some information and getting the children to visualize a problem before they then tackle the information. So that was just one of many things. If you were to speak to directly now to some new teachers like myself back then, what would be, this is going to be a hard question for you, but what would be, I guess, your advice for a really passionate, fresh teacher who really wants to nail their maths teaching and be a better maths teacher? What would you say to them?
Okay, there's so many little things, and the thing, I guess, before I answer that, I would say for people just to be patient with themselves, because I am a kind of person, I'm really driven and really passionate, and things have gone wrong for me so often, and that's part of the kind of experimentation within teaching as well, and children benefit from you experimenting, and I think, kind of to that end, I guess that I would say is that the teacher, you are not a deliverer of a scheme. And what we want to be able to do is, it's fantastic to have a structure, and that's really helpful, and to have great resources. And it's thinking about how do I and where do I take ownership of that? And how do I ensure that what the children are telling me in their success, that I am able to adapt to them. And for that to take the form of, it might be within a lesson, I'm looking for little checks for understanding. And I would use the tools of, giving children individual thinking time, looking at little questions that I can give that will check for understanding within a lesson, and looking at how I adapt within a lesson, but also kind of looking over time and seeing the characteristics that children are building, and where is it that I should place my emphasis. So when I take the structure that I work within, how do I amend it, and how do I make that my own? And I guess to some extent as well, just the general encouragement I give anyone in any subject is just to be open with the things that you're unsure of or finding difficult, and finding different opinions. And like I remember moving to, one of my favorite examples that I give, I think maybe it's my least favorite example I give, was moving to year one and finding my partner teacher just delivering things much more effectively than I was. And I was quite senior in my career then. And actually, I just knew what I needed to do, is I just need to go and have a look at what it looks like in there. And I think it's, to some extent, it's that humility as well that is, it's really important.
I think, you nailed that. And I think you mentioned it early on, then you went into more detail about, you've made mistakes. You've made plenty of mistakes yourself. And I think it's so important for people to hear that, because I am definitely a sucker for the whole, it's like the example of like Instagram versus reality. People always say that, don't they? What you see on Instagram, wherever it is not really reality. And I guess it's the same in teaching. You might go to some incredible training and speak to some incredible people. It doesn't mean they're not making any mistakes. And it's definitely worth knowing that. So thank you. I wish I'd heard that early on, because I definitely beat myself up too many times when one lesson wasn't perfect, and it's like, it's fine.
And then after you beat yourself up, I then came and beat you up as well. So
yeah, because you taught the lesson that I planned. Yeah.
we were planning partners when we first started off as well. Okay. So there was definitely an idea of competition here. And we didn't let each other, have that kind of. And looking back, we should have let ourselves off a little bit every now and then, because it's important. And Gareth, it's been amazing advice, and truly fantastic. And I know you said you like being challenged and not just praised, but I'm here to praise you now because it's been such a nice chat, and really appreciate you giving us your time. And I do think that Hayden asked if you had a story that you wanted to share with us, that we often ask anyone who comes on the podcast to give us a little anecdote from their time in teaching. It could be heartwarming, funny, just interesting. Do you have one ready for us?
Yeah, I do. And this again is something that I don't think I've ever mentioned before, but it is oh goodness, if I'm guessing the year, this is maybe 2012 now. I'd mentioned at the beginning, the first resource I ever created was called the Maths Apprenticeship, and they were challenges that used to take a group of children. So we used to give children a little assessment towards the end of the unit, and some children might need additional, the judgment I'd made at the time is some children might benefit from having that additional time, more direct teacher time, that they can get supported to go over some of the content and to address some of the misconceptions. And we had some children that would go on to what we used to call the extension pathway, which were the maths apprentice tasks, which again were the first tasks that I ever published. And so it might be, one task was around ordering a stock rotation system for a fruit stall. And there was another one, I'm racking my brains now, which was looking at some data from a football season and providing some suggestions to managers. So there's all kinds of different tasks. There was one, which was probably one of my favorites, which was designing and writing security codes for the MI5. So the children would have this bespoke prompt. And what they would then do is they would have to meet someone and communicate their thinking to that person. So, for example, I would go out the room normally, or invite someone else, and I would come back in dressed up as the stall holder. I'd take on a different guise. And then, but the children would quite quickly fall into the narrative, and they would have to communicate what they're suggesting. So I'd been, I forget the name of the person from a theme park manager who was looking for a suggestion, and then I'd come in as Alex, the stall holder, who was didn't really understand his figures very well and needed a bit of support. But then my favorite one, and this was well before the kind of days of Zoom, was coming in for the MI5 task, was Skyping the class, wearing a pair of shades from the planning, like the PPA room, and the children having to give and explaining their MI5, the security codes, which was like, they had to come up with something that would generate a 4-digit code using personal information and the date. So they would have to think of a way of doing it, and it would always have to be generate a 4-digit number. But the way that they would always explain, as I say, we would once a year we would Skype in, and then what they would always do is they would always try and run after the lesson to get to the PPA room. It's really me in there. But again, that's probably one of my favorites.
Sweet.
That is the, you know, the epitome of me, of loving teaching and making those unbelievable experiences for the kids, because it's just going above and beyond. And it wouldn't have taken much, would it, for you to put some shades on and go in the other room? But those small choices we can make, those children will remember that the whole time. They'll always remember that. That's amazing.
But you said to me, what word do you think of when you think of English? And my mind went blank. And it was almost like a little joke, because the kids knew I was really passionate about maths. And so when it was SATs, they would do the reading first, and then they would do the spag. So we'd just come in like dressed normally. And then all our team, we used to get dressed up for maths. So we even went as far as getting the tuxedo on.
That's really funny.
It was the maths side.
That's really good. Yeah.
That might have worked less well if English wasn't first.
Yes, that's exactly right. They'd have been panicking when they came in. Yeah.
Oh, it's fine. It's just English, guys. No problem.
That's so funny. I love that.
Oh, Gareth, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think we're going to round it off there. I can't believe how useful this has been. You know, we're maths leads now. We've been teaching for upwards of 10 years, and we got so much out of that chat. And I think the one thing we want from this is to be able to share it with people who are less experienced potentially, or even the same experienced, and just realize that it's just a constant learning journey, and there's always something to think about and to develop on, and you've shown that perfectly. So huge thank you for coming on, Gareth.
Well, thanks. I've really enjoyed it. So anytime, if you'll ever have me back, I'd love to come. But thanks.
Wow, Dylan, that was an amazing chat. How do you feel after that?
It's one of those moments, isn't it? You know, we spoke to Sophie recently. I finished that chat and I was just so, enthused again. And I've just got the same feeling after talking to Gareth. And I think it's such a positive thing to have, because we got a lot of comments, didn't we, Hayden, when we started this podcast that, oh gosh, teaching, eh? Oh, and we were really worried about that. We were giving off that kind of aura of the negative things. But it's so true what you said. It excites you to listen to these people who are complete experts in what they do. And, it's no secret that we love maths, and listening to him talk about it. And I think what was really reassuring was two things for me. Maybe you can expand on these. Number one was that he was just as open with he gets things wrong constantly, because there can be this aura around these kind of personalities online that they're just these amazing people who get it right all the time. That's really, really positive. I think a message to have for everyone.
Positive aura.
And the other thing was positive aura. The second, moving on to my second thing, was the fact that he kind of was on the same page as us. I found that really positive as well, and kind of, giving us that kind of thumbs up to say, no, you are doing the right thing. You do think of it this way, and you do know what you're doing. And I got that from that as well.
I personally felt that beyond his aura, we actually, in all seriousness, we gained basically like a private CPD session, because he was so full of knowledge and made me think so much about my own practice. By the end of it, I was like in my own head, kind of like I am at the end of a CPD session, a professional development session. I know I do that all the time, just say random jargon.
Pedagogy.
Yeah, I'm a pedagogy. I'm underfed. That's not jargon. That's just me being a fool. Go back and listen to our previous episodes if you don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, Gareth was incredible at just unpicking the questions we had, and then just delivering some amazing insights based on his experience and his career, obviously in the teaching world. So very, very grateful to have that conversation, and it's definitely going to impact the way I teach in my next lessons this term, hopefully even next year again, because there were so many exciting things that he reminded me of from earlier on in my career, when I had just had more time, maybe, I guess, to devote to certain things, and I miss doing them.
I think one thing he said that I've definitely picked up on, and it's on that theme of it's okay to get things wrong, but it's even more specific. And it was that idea of individual schools were on different journeys in their kind of progress on different curriculums. And the idea of, he's very fortunate to be able to just focus on maths. I think teachers beat themselves up a lot. I know I certainly do, when I think, if I did just spend 2 more hours doing this thing, then this sequence of lessons may have been much more enjoyable or way more engaging. But we just don't have that time, because we're being pulled in 5 different directions. And I think that idea that he had, he was very clear. And I think it's really easy for people like Gareth, people like us, even as math leads in school, to have a really narrow focus on our own subject and just think, okay, I've had some CPD on this. I think this is going to be transformative for the school, have all the best of intentions, but then end up actually inflicting huge levels of workload, stress, and it being a negative outcome. And people don't feel as enthused as you. And you think, well, why not? And the obvious answer is, it's just down to time. They're probably very, very, very up for having this professional development, but they just physically can't manage it.
You're right. We all have our own passions, and that was our passion, and that's his passion. He can put that time in. So I think the kind of summary of his message is, if you're passionate about a subject, just quit your job and then go and do that subject all the time. I hope, Gareth, that I've I'm only joking, of course.
I've got to tell you though, something maybe we could talk about now quickly as just a thought on that, because I thought at the time, it's something that's been thrown about in previous schools that I've worked in as a genuine suggestion as to the way of splitting up your staff, is you find with teachers a lot of the time, just naturally they fall on one side of the wall. They're either going to be preferring teaching maths or preferring teaching English, and that could be preference in terms of enjoyment, or it could be preference in terms of how good they feel they are at delivering that curriculum. And the idea that was thrown about never went any further. I wonder if any schools, anyone listening has tried this before, was the idea of splitting staff not just by year group and teaching maths and English in the morning, but splitting staff through subject. And you'd have some teachers who maybe lower school have maths first session and then upper school have maths second session, and you'd get one teacher who would teach a maths lesson lower school, then after break teach a maths lessons in the upper school, and then you'd also have almost like a paired English teacher who would take the class at the opposite times for English if they were more specialized in English or preferred English. And as someone who naturally levitates towards maths, my ears pricked up at that idea. And you'd think that maybe I'd be on the side of doing that, but I tell you what, and I'd be interested to see what you think, I don't think that would necessarily be automatically beneficial for the children or for the staff to do that constantly throughout? I don't know what you think.
It's a really hard one. I think it depends on your level of passion, because I don't think not many people are as passionate, but I know that we're on the extreme end of like the passion for maths, and some people might just prefer it a little bit more. But two things, I actually did that for a while. I don't know if you remember, it was a long time ago, and it was only for a term or two. But I did actually do that where I taught maths for the time before break, and then I went to a different year group and I taught maths again in after break time, and I thoroughly enjoyed it personally, like doing that. And I also know someone who did it for a year at a different school. They went and only taught maths for a whole year, and they said they absolutely loved it. But they also said they felt really de-skilled coming back to a normal environment and teaching at the other subjects. And in the long term, it wasn't remotely beneficial, but it was an enjoyable time while it lasted. So, pros and cons, I guess.
I suppose that's the point, I guess, that if you are going to continue being a classroom teacher, if you don't necessarily have the ability to stop what you're doing and put all your time into maths because someone as driven as Gareth is so successful he's able to do that, then there is that risk, isn't there, of actually, what is the reason that you're less passionate about English? I actually thoroughly enjoy teaching English as well. I'm just so passionate about maths that there's kind of a disparity there, some might say. But I still love teaching English, and there's a lot I get out of teaching English. But if I was to stop doing that completely, I'm not sure that I'd be a better teacher for it. And I'm going to continue being a teacher. Now, if I was to become a maths specialist and just focus on maths resources, then maybe that doesn't matter as much. But I think potentially that wouldn't be a positive for someone who, especially, let's say I move school at some point and they don't offer that. I'm going to be really stuck in a place there of, English, I've not done this for 5 years.
Well,
I don't know.
We see this in PE, don't we, all the time? It's quite a common thing that schools will hire in like PE coordinators and coaches and teams and things to run their PE curriculum essentially. And then teachers of those schools go and get another job 5-10 years later where they have to teach PE twice a week and they have absolutely no idea how. And there's always this dialogue, isn't there, of we should be really, really careful not to de-skill ourselves for a temporary convenience or just a convenience at the school, because you just don't know what's going to be required of you later on. And if that is a general requirement that you teach PE, if that's like part of the job, which it is, teaching English, teaching PE is generally considered part of the job, then you probably should be careful to take like a really bespoke role at the school you work in where you don't teach particular subjects, just in case, But everyone's in different positions. You might be confident that that's all you're going to do till you retire. There's no risk there, but like you said, if you just plan on being a teacher, you never know if you're de-skilling yourself.
And like Gareth touched on, actually, without those opportunities for him to just focus on maths, he would not have nearly enough time to dive into those kind of deep-rooted problem solving and think about ways to help teachers on the macro level. So it's a double-edged sword. I don't think there's an answer here. I think you've got to do what's right for you. And it's going to be one of our classic discussions here where we don't really fall on one side. We just say, well, there's options for both. Yeah. It's very interesting. I'm not sure where I fall on that.
Do you know what? There was one question we didn't ask Gareth, and I wish we had time. We're gonna have to get him back on. We're gonna have to get him back on one day in the future, because I really wanted to ask Gareth about his opinions on Rishi Sunak's kind of bill. I don't know if it's a bill or move towards making everyone do maths until they're 18. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah. That was in the news recently, and there was a big outcry. It was such a weird one for me. I don't know about you, Hayden, because my gut instinct when I heard that was, I feel like there is a lot of maths anxiety in the adult population. I feel like a lot of people are way more accepting that, I don't do maths, in a way that we never see for reading. You don't see people going around saying, I don't read. There's a stigma around not being able to read, being illiterate, and we need to help those people as much as possible. But we do get more, people tend to get more embarrassment from saying they can't read. Whereas when it comes to maths, it's sometimes worn as a badge. I don't do numbers, me. And that anything that can kind of help the attitude. We saw it during the lockdowns and COVID and things. The statistics that were brought out daily, there were people who just kind of didn't really understand what they were looking at because they never had to, digest data in such huge amounts daily, and they relied on people interpreting it for them. And I think there's a lot to be said for people being helped in maths more. Does making it compulsory until 18 solve that problem? I don't think it will.
Do you know what solves the problem a bit better? Gareth's idea of teaching children and young adults about the emotional side of maths, like reducing that anxiety by tackling it in a different way. I think our country is obsessed with do more. More is better. That is like the approach to a lot of things. It's like, do more. People don't like maths, can't do maths, do more. It's like, you know, it is a bit deeper than that. So my gut reaction was like, that's a stupid idea. Stupid idea, making people do maths at 18. Like,
if someone's got to 16 and they hate maths and can't do it, and they've just got kind of completely detached themselves from it, is putting them through 2 more years of that going to be highly beneficial? I think, like everything ever, we have to go back to the root cause, and not to get political, but to get political, because we like to do that sometimes.
You do.
I feel like it's another band-aid rather than a cause of the root problem. You know, there's a huge problem in retaining teachers and recruiting them. Oh, okay, we'll put the starting salary up a bit. Okay, does that help retention? No. You know, it's another sticky plaster on something rather than getting to the root cause of actually trying to fix it. And I think you're right. And I think what Gareth said's right, is the further back you go and start it earlier on, actually that path then doesn't have to be longer. It can be shorter, but it's a better path to be on in the first place.
Yeah. Well, luckily Rishi's a listener, an avid listener actually of our podcast. As could all of your friends be if you share this podcast with your buddies. Just saying. Was that good?
I love that.
Was that a good link?
That was good. Yeah.
Nice.
It's something, Hayden, listen, we've read the guides. We have to say it as much as possible. You know, it's cringy, but I love that. That was really good. Yeah. And you know, we are on Twitter now, so you could retweet it. Sure, you're in the commute, and you know, you guys like maths. They're gonna love this chat that we've just had, guys.
I've got one, Dylan. I've got one. Ready? Hey guys, we want you to retweet this if you like teaching.
Spoken like a true man who uses Twitter and definitely isn't winging it. Marketing 101. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Hope you found that as useful and amazing as we did. And we'll catch you next time.